Welcome, Climate Viewers. This is Jim Lee from Climate Viewer News at climateviewer.com, and I am pleased to have with me Dr. Shiva Ayudarai, MIT PhD, the inventor of email, is a scientist, inventor, entrepreneur, a Fulbright scholar who holds 4 degrees from MIT, including his PhD in biological engineering. He started 7 successful high-tech companies, providing thousands of jobs in Massachusetts. His life has been about solving very tough problems by identifying the root cause, bringing together people to innovate real solutions. Now he wants to serve America beyond the left and right to deliver solutions we need and deserve. Most importantly, Dr. Shiva is one of us, not another lawyer or lobbyist or politician, and I am very excited to talk to him today about one of the biggest concerns that I know my audience has, and that would be geoengineering and weather modification. Pleased to have you, Dr. Shiva.
Great, Jim. How are you? And I think, Jim, when we spoke earlier, we want to talk about geoengineering. And I think one of the fallouts of that is pollution, and then
Correct.
what causes and what that does to human health. Many years ago, almost a decade ago now, I did a video, nearly a decade ago, on showing, when the Paris Accords was being put in place, that it had, frankly, no benefit because it actually incentivized people to pollute. And we don't, quote unquote, CO2 is not a, or CO2, quote unquote, is not a pollutant, by the way, but they deemed it as a pollutant, But anyway, I think this should be an interesting conversation.
It's interesting that you start out that way, because in 2015, I went to the Environmental Protection Agency had a hearing in 2015 because of President Obama lobbying on behalf of the Paris Accords, trying to use the Clean Air Act to regulate the airline industry, basically saying that greenhouse gas emissions from planes were endangering human health. Now, clearly the Clean Air Act was designed specifically for cancer-causing chemicals, forever chemicals, things like that. Things that are going to affect human health directly, not I said that they were violating the spirit of the law. And the Clean Air Act clearly was about breathing clean air. What would be your response to, the climate agenda, the climate cultists, in my personal opinion, using laws that were clearly intended for protecting human health under the guise of the COP21, we're all going to burn up. Hey, let's use that kind of lawfare to regulate greenhouse gas emissions.
Well, Jim, I've been very clear on this, as I mentioned, all the way back in 2014, 2015, as a scientist. As an engineer, more specifically, scientists can bullshit, engineers can't. There's a big difference between science and engineering. So I just want to take a step back and just talk about that briefly, and then go into this, is that the way science develops is you come up with a hypothesis of something, right?
Yes.
And then you do a bunch of experiments. That's called the scientific method. If your experiments match your hypothesis, that becomes what's known as a scientific law for a period of time, right? And then you try to figure out why that law exists, and that becomes what's called capital T, theory, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, Newton discovered the law of gravity. Einstein tried to explain it, and that became known as a theory of relativity. So a lot of people don't understand there's a difference between a law and the theoretical framework. The theoretical framework tries to understand why something works.
I see where you're going.
The law gives you an observation of why it works, right?
Right.
And then an engineer comes in, and an engineer looks at these laws, and then they try to practically use those laws to create something for others, right? That's called engineering. So Newton may have figured out the laws of gravity. Einstein attempted to describe why it worked. An engineer like, Den Hartog, who was a professor at MIT, or Stephen Crandall, who did the dynamics for the space shuttle, or Den Hartog helped define the field of structures, develop the engineering science to build bridges, let's say, or skyscrapers, right? Using those. So that's sort of a quick summary of how you go from science to engineering. But engineers have to deal with the reality of these laws and trying to make them work, right? Scientists sort of just can walk away. So, I have a bunch of degrees from MIT in engineering, electrical, mechanical, design and biological. So I've always had to deal with reality. Now, what's unfortunate is none of the presidential candidates that are running, none of them have ever had to deal with reality. These guys aren't engineers. They've never had to make anything, build anything. In all the way back for a long, long time, right? Washington was an engineer. He was a surveyor. Franklin was an engineer. Jefferson was an engineer, right? These guys had to build stuff. But most of
they also weren't full-time employees of the government.
Exactly.
They traveled to Washington. They came back home because they had real jobs to do.
And if you contrast it right now, you have a bunch of people who, frankly, are from the top down. They're the swarm. Booby effing Kennedy doesn't know anything about any of this. He was promoting climate change. He wants carbon tax. In the middle of 2020, he was promoting lockdowns, and he was justifying it in two ways. They will stop the spread of COVID. I'm talking about Booby effing Kennedy. That's my name. I refer to Robert F. Doofus Kennedy Jr. And I like to use that name because these people are just brand, advertising people who, uses his father's name and adds a JR to it to have some credibility. But, he was
he came to my hometown, and we went there with the news team just simply to ask him, because he is very much on the climate train. Do you support geoengineering or not? Just that, to answer that question alone. And I had a long talk with Dennis Kucinich because he previously passed the Space Preservation Act, which was going to ban weapons in space. He tried to get that passed. Of course, nobody would have that because the military industrial complex loves weapons in space. But anyway, he shuffled me to the front.
Including Israel, who he's a big supporter of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and they all love their weapons in space. China has them, Russia has them, and of course we have them. So anyway, he never could get an answer out of him because he basically burned the time out, and then he moved on. But that's one of the obviously being an engineer, understanding that there is a problem. The problem is that they've generated a lot of propaganda and fear around the idea of runaway global warming. And I don't know if you've ever heard this term, the clathrate gun hypothesis. The idea being that they drilled for ice cores in the poles, and then they went back to the time of dinosaurs. And during that time, they see a bunch of CO2 here. And then that's followed by a marked increase in methane. So the scientists theorize, well, dinosaur farts caused methane clathrates to vent into the sky. Now, methane clathrates are frozen methane that are either under the Arctic shelf or under the ocean. So because global warming caused by dinosaur farts caused methane to erupt into the sky, this was what was called runaway global warming. And that's what the basis for the current fear porn that we hear out there is that human activity, CO2, is going to drive methane to vent, and then suddenly we're all going to die in short order. I would say that, wasn't there some talk about, meteors involved in, the possible end? Nobody really knows for certain what ended the dinosaurs, or would you say that there's a possibility that dinosaur farts, they killed themselves from their own emissions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about any of that, but let me, let me share with you a little bit of science, okay? That'll help.
Okay.
Put this in context. Look, when you just step back and you look at it from an engineering phenomenon, if you're going to implement an intervention, if you're going to do something to your physical body, let's say your house has some, you think something's going to happen to your house, you do some preventative measures, right? You're always thinking, okay, if I do this intervention, do I get a benefit out of this, right?
Right.
If I eat more green vegetables, what's the benefit? If I eat more protein, what's the benefit, right? Before you do any intervention, you want to find out, is there a benefit in anything, right? I'm going to drive my car. Should I get regular maintenance? How often should I get my teeth cleaned, right? Every one of these things are interventions. And typically in the back of your mind, you're making some decision on what is the cost benefit of that, right? You're going to put in this much, what's the benefit? There's absolutely zero benefit to this bullshit called climate change science and the Paris Accords. Why do I say that? Well, let's just go back to, again, there's a very nice book here, which is the book that written by one of the greatest engineers in the world, Nice, right? Control Systems Engineering, okay? So control systems engineering is the foundations of systems engineering. By the way, we'll do a little video. We teach the principles of that in our course called Truth, Freedom, and Health, Foundations of Systems, which we've made accessible to everyone on the planet. And you don't have to spend a ton of money going to MIT. But what you learn from systems science is the following. Every intelligent system in the universe has a feedback process. It knows how to maintain homeostasis. Your body right now is about 98, degrees Fahrenheit, plus or minus a degree, right? And it knows beautifully how to maintain that temperature. How? You have a part of your body called the hypothalamus, which is a controller, which senses conditions, and it knows how to maintain your body at that temperature, all right? So the fundamental question is, every intelligent system in the universe has the ability to do feedback processes and maintain homeostasis. So the question is the Earth or the universe, because it's a natural system, is it also an intelligent system? Does it know how to modulate itself to maintain the surface temperature, let's say 15 degrees Celsius? This is a fundamental question. Or can interventions or exogenous things that happen to it or endogenous things throw it off wacko? You go out, and it gets very hot. Your body doesn't go up to 120 degrees, right?
Right.
You start sweating.
Right.
Your body knows how to open its pores, and you know how to modulate that. So all intelligent systems in the universe know how to maintain homeostasis. All right. So if that's clear, the question is nature an intelligent system? Sure, appears to be, because it has seasons, right? We know how to maintain things. The sun, rises, sun sets, right? There's a rhythm here. So if we just go back to very simple principles, Jim, very, very simple principles, and we just take it from a simple engineering approach, you'll find out the following, okay? And everything I'm going to share with you right now, everyone, whether you're pro climate change or you believe that nonsense or you don't believe it, everyone agrees with these things I'm going to share with you. There's no dispute on this. The sun is around 6,000 degrees Kelvin, okay? The sun puts out a lot of radiation, energy. That energy is measured in watts, W-A-T-T-S, okay? That energy hits the earth, okay? And how much energy hits the earth? About 340 watts per meter. So if you take a square meter of the earth's, surface, about 340 hits that. Mm-hmm. If that much energy is hitting us, Jim, what has to happen? The earth has got to dissipate.
We have to lose that. That's the laws of entropy, correct?
Yeah, it's the laws of, energy cannot be, created or destroyed. It's the laws of thermodynamics. Because if all of that radiation hit the earth
and built up over time, then we would eventually boil.
We would burn up, okay? And there's some formulation that says around 3 watts. If 3 watts, roughly 3 watts, is equivalent to about 1 degree in temperature change, centigrade, okay? So if you take 340 watts per meter and all of that is coming from the sun, and let's say we didn't dissipate any of it, divide the 340 roughly by 3, you can say about 100, the Earth's temperature would go up by 100 degrees, but it doesn't, right? We're getting hit with the sun, and it's not like we're being fried to death, right? Why is that? The reason is there's something called convection. and dissipation. So that energy comes to us from the sun, and we happen to do what's called energy balance. So how does that happen? Out of the 340 watts per meter that comes from the sun to the earth, 140 watts per meter bounces back right off the atmosphere. Okay? So how
That's
much
albedo, correct?
Huh?
That's the albedo, correct?
Yes, exactly. And now you have 200 watts per meter that has to comes in through the atmosphere into the Earth's surface. All right. So now if you look at the atmosphere is composed of all different types of water vapor, clouds, gases, right? And that's a fluid, actually. It's a big fluid mixture, the atmosphere itself. The oceans are composed of water, seawater. That's another fluid.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is that other 200 watts per meter that comes in through a very interesting process called convection, which is the interaction of the turbulent oceans, water, with the atmosphere combined together, and the other 200 watts per meter is dissipated back out. So that's how we maintain a surface temperature of around 15 degrees centigrade. Okay? And everything I've said, no one disagrees with. Everyone on both sides agrees with. There's no disagreement. In fact, everyone agrees that when all that energy comes in, some of it could get trapped in the earth and heat up the earth under certain conditions. Okay? So there are,
and that's what I'd like to go to next, is that, so this is the big, the C word that nobody wants to talk about, the chemtrails, as they're commonly referred to. I like to refer to them as plane farts, because in searching Google Scholar and doing this for over 15 years, I've heard them called everything under the sun, from contrails to persistent contrails to aviation-induced cloudiness to contrail-induced cirrus. But during 9/11, in the days following 9/11, the Langley Research Center basically published a paper that said that the diurnal temperature range widened greatly because of the lack of cirrus clouds. So this was again followed up by Lee et al. 2009 as a study of the 2008 Iceland volcanoes and the grounding of all the airplanes during that time. What they came to the conclusion was that basically cirrus clouds created by jet aircraft, commercial aviation, were actually trapping heat at the ground. So as a layperson, it seemed very simple to me that there was no such thing as a greenhouse gas if you do not have a greenhouse. In order for you to create a closed system to trap that heat at the ground, you must have a greenhouse. And most greenhouses are made of glass or plastic. But in this case, when we're talking 1.5 million barrels of jet fuel per day, and I'd like to share this real quick with you. Let me click this present button and see if you can see this real quick. Go to entire screen, and here, when we look at the actual chemicals that are available in jet fuel, these are from about 16 different studies total that have looked at freshly emitted particles that are coming out of the rear of the jet planes. Okay, so this is all involved directly in what is currently geoengineering the sky. According to Chuck Long, he said that aviation is creating clear sky daylight brightening that we are already geoengineering, because these chemicals in conjunction with carbon black dust, 1 million tons of carbon black dust nanoparticles per year are lofted into the stratosphere, coated in sulfur dioxide and sulfuric acid. And all of these marked in red are metals that end up in the stratosphere. So what I would say is, we have the situation where if you talk about this at all, if you mention the dirty airline industry, if you mention the proposals from the Biden administration, from the European Union to do solar radiation modification studies, they will all say at the same time, no, we're not geoengineering. Yet the university you attended, MIT, whenever they went to ban bunker fuel, which was creating ship tracks, they said we're about to stop a massive experimental program in cooling the earth because of the sulfur emissions from bunker fuel, heavy fuel oil. So MIT University was mad about that. Smithsonian Magazine, when covering Chuck Long, said we are accidentally geoengineering using airplane contrails. What would you say to the people who are?
Yes, so Jim, I think before we go there, I think it's important to explain this basic thing because I want to talk about clouds. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Here's the bottom line, right? And I want to layer in what you just said. If you look at the Earth interaction with the sun as a system, the sun sends radiation here, right? The radiation comes here, 340 watts per meter, 140 bounces out. The other 200 watts per meter is also dissipated out through this very complex interaction of two turbulent fluids, the ocean waters, which is a turbulent fluid, and the atmosphere. All right. Now, when these quote unquote climate change scientists, by the way, there's no field called climate science. It's all bullshit. In fact, there's no field called climate science.
I'm aware of that.
The actual field is fluid mechanics and radiative physics. Okay. Fluid mechanics, we study in theoretical mechanics, which I've studied for many, many years. Radiative physics is another very interesting area, but the physicists study that. There's no science called, you don't get a degree in climate change science. So, and furthermore, so when all of this nonsense started occurring, a bunch of people were funded to create these climate change models, mathematical models. And what they're doing is they're trying to predict how much heat gets stored in the earth using this phenomenon. I said, okay, 340 watts per meter is coming in, 140 bounces back. Out of the 200, how much gets stuck? Now, these gases, greenhouse, quote unquote, greenhouse gases, everyone acknowledges they can increase temperature. Everyone will tell you that. Okay. But in science, we're not interested in just lofty hand waving or engineering. The question is always how much? How much? Okay. How much, right? Like if someone says, oh my God, you have a fever. Well, how much? How much is my fever going to go up? Yeah, if it's around 98, 99, I'm fine. If it goes to 120 degrees, you're going to die. Okay. We care how much.
Right.
Right. That's when they rush you into the hospital. Right.
Yes, sir.
So the issue is how much. So how did they figure out? So there's all these predictions saying, oh my God, the temperature is going to go up. The ice caps are going to melt on the Arctic. Right. How do they do this? They created mathematical models. And the mathematical models are modeling the ocean of the Earth, on the Earth, interacting, which is a turbulent fluid, by the way, interacting with the atmosphere, another turbulent fluid. Again, I'm giving you something that you don't hear in the mainstream media, but this is the actual physics. Everyone should be educated on this. Those two turbulent fluids, by the way, to model one turbulent fluid, no one's done it. It's called the Navier-Stokes equation you study in graduate school or in undergraduate school, okay, in engineering. The Navier-Stokes equation is a set of equations that you can use to understand the flow of fluids. If you turn on the water, water comes out. That's called laminar flow. We can model that. We have been unable to model the very complex motions of the ocean waters. Or if you heat a pot, you make, I just got some tea made, and when the vapor moves, very complex, we don't know how to model that. You can win a $1 million prize. Any mathematician can model that, a turbulent fluid. So they are claiming they model two turbulent fluids, and using that model, their models predict that the Earth's temperature is going to go up by 2 to 3 degrees. Okay, because they're claiming, remember, for each 3 watts per meter, 1 degree will get stored. They're claiming about 9 to 12 watts is going to get stored. We're not going to be able to dissipate that out because of CO2. Okay? That's where all of this comes from. Now, if you go look at the IPCC report, it's a big multi-thousand page report. 1 page of that report actually has the mathematical model. Okay?
Really?
Yes. Now, what's interesting is when Isaac Newton had his model of if you drop an apple, he can predict exactly how long it'll take for that apple to fall, right? That's called a law. That's called evidence. Evidence is reproducible predictions. Write that down. Evidence is reproducible predictions. So when Isaac Newton developed the equations of motion, he has absolute evidence that if he drops an apple from this side, he knows exactly when it's going to fall, right? The apple doesn't fall and just hang in the middle. You know, it's not like you drop the apple one time, it falls, let's say the apple tree where the apple is 20 feet above the ground. When the apple drops, it's going to drop 20 feet, okay? It's not like one time it drops 20 feet. The other time the prediction, it's going to hover above the earth at 19 feet, 50 feet, right? You have one answer. All right. Now I'm going to show you a diagram here. So if you go to the IPCC report, they use their mathematical models based on what I just shared with you, this background, and they have come up with a prediction of how much ice is going to melt on the Arctic. Okay? Now you would think, so if it's truly evidence, that means, and by the way, just to give you a background, there are 120 different models that they used, 120 different models. So if you have 120 different models, and if each model should predict the same answer, right? Then it would be evidence. Does that make sense?
But
evidence is reproducible predictions.
In the case of the atmosphere, I mean, we're talking billions of data points would need to be put into that computer model to even come close to accurately predicting what the weather would be like tomorrow, let alone what the climate would be like.
Let me show you. These are some of the models. Okay, what do you see here? So the y-axis is over the years, and the x-axis is, you see, ice extent percent. So this model way at top, the purple one, is predicting about 90% of ice will melt. Okay, and that's this one's predicting about nothing, 100% will melt, 90% will melt. These are predicting no ice is going to melt. Okay, in fact, there's an answer for every possible situation. So what my point is, each line here represents each model. If you're supposed to have what's called convergence, okay? So climate model projections of rate of Arctic ice loss. You notice that none of them converge. So that means all these models, like a Baskin-Robbins flavor, like you go to the ice cream store, are giving very different answers. And this would be equivalent, Jim, to Isaac, an apple falling, and you have 100 different predictions. That's not evidence. Evidence is reproducible predictions. So I just wanted to share that. And by the way, that's stuck all the way in like page 500 or something, and no one bothers reading it.
And the observation data on that chart stops at 2009, and what we know for a fact now is that the ice, the sea ice extent grew exponentially after this. So despite you can go ahead and discount most of those predictions that show that there would be a greater loss of ice because it actually grew exponentially. Even Greenland's ice sheet is growing back currently. So they're always wrong. They always will be wrong, because until we have light speed super computers that can send enough sensor data to even input it.
Look, point is there should be, all of these lines should convert at one point.
Right.
But the fact that you have all these different models running and each are predicting different amounts of ice that are going to melt shows that they don't have any science behind this. Okay?
Right.
And that's really the takeaway. And everyone should really take a screenshot of this, okay? Everyone should understand that they have no evidence. Evidence is reproducible predictions. Do you see any reproducible prediction? No. What you see is just like the analogy of an apple falling from the tree, saying that when that apple falls, in some cases, it'll hover in the air at different points. So this is not evidence. And the problem is no one teaches this in basic school anymore. What is the definition of evidence? Evidence is reproducible predictions. They don't have any reproducible predictions. They're getting, 20, 30, 100 different answers. All right. So that's a key takeaway. So therefore, the science behind the so-called science, there is no science. Now, the biggest thing these models left out in this, to answer your question, Jim, is that they left out. So when you're doing modeling, now you can, model very cool things. I do modeling all day long. We model all sorts of complex biological function. And a model gets better by the more you include many variables.
Right.
Guess what they did not include in these models?
The sun?
No.
Solar cycles?
Nope.
Tell me.
Clouds.
Aerosol cloud interaction remains the greatest unknown in climate science.
But they didn't, because a cloud, is seeded with particles, right?
Right.
With nucleates. But the bottom takeaway for everyone understanding this, why would you not include clouds? Now, over the last 7 years, there's been some very good research done showing that the clouds in the atmosphere act like the iris of your eye. So if I shine a bright light at you right now, if you notice, your eyes will close up. If it gets dark, your eyes get wide, right? It's called the iris effect.
Mm-hmm.
So these clouds, very specific kinds of clouds, the clouds are like the hypothalamus in your body, okay? If there's heat being trapped, the clouds know how to change. It's fascinating. The Earth is an intelligent system.
That's right.
The clouds actually form different structures, and they're able to either keep heat in or they're able to dissipate more heat out, like the iris. In fact, a billion years ago, the surface temperature of the sun was 30% less in temperature. 30% less would mean it wasn't 6,000 degrees Kelvin, as I shared earlier. It was around 4,000 degrees. Now, if the sun is putting out less radiation, what would you think, the Earth would be? It would be an ice, right? Because there's less. But guess what? We have evidence knowing that there was flowing waters on the Earth. It wasn't an ice pit, because the clouds knew how to modulate, even though the sun's radiation was down by 30%.
It would just trap more heat in.
So clouds nature, the Earth is an intelligent system. The clouds are intelligence. They know how to form. So clouds have been left out of the entire equation. Now, I believe, and the reason I had to give this background, Jim, is that I believe they know this.
They do.
So I believe that
in fact, I do know that they know this, because we've had multiple discussions. I've been talking to Ken Caldera, David Keith. These are the two of the top geoengineers on the planet. And one of the very first things I posed to Ken Caldera was, if you have not been able to prove the scientific efficacy of cloud seeding since 1946, how do you intend to prove the efficacy of geoengineering in the next 60 years? Because if you cannot prove on a small scale that introducing particles of silver iodide in a very small area will produce X, then why should we believe that you can modulate the entire climate by blocking sunlight and that your computer models will be accurate? So they have this thing called the Geoengineering Model Intercomparison Project, which is very similar to that scatter plot that you just showed. They're all over the place. In fact, it's so bad that if they run the same model and they take it to a different computer, it comes up with completely different results. They even talked about coming up with a deaths per watts per square meter, chart, because it's that bad. So what I was just wanting to get to you about the clouds is this is one of the extreme examples of what, they're currently talking about. So I interviewed Dr. Rangasai Halthori. He's from the Aviation Climate Change Research Initiative. And if you could bring that infographic up.
Jim, just wait 1 second before we
Okay,
go
sure.
there. I just want to make sure people are, because I know you have a lot of information, sure, but the reason we're in this situation is a lot of people don't understand the fundamentals. All right.
Right.
We have to understand that the fundamental is that the Earth puts out a certain amount of radiation. The Earth, or the sun does, and the Earth system is a very intelligent system. It knows how to take all that heat and dissipate it out. This is very important to understand, this very basic principles. The models that they have created to describe that dissipation effect did not include clouds. Okay. And
that is 100% on point.
Right. But very few people discuss this. It's not known that all the models, the climate change models, did not include clouds. All right. When you add clouds, you have what's called the iris effect. And the Earth very intelligently maintains temperature. So getting back to that fundamental point on climate change, the issue is how much. Okay. Now, in the late 1800s, we had, since then, when we had a mini ice age, we've been melting. Okay. So there's going to be a little bit of increase, right? 1 to 2 degrees, which has been predicted because we were at the end of about 100 years ago, a mini ice age. All right. So this is just minor fluctuations, but the bottom line is all the models did not include clouds. So therefore, if clouds are very powerful, they're intelligent at maintaining a wonderful surface temperature, homeostasis, like your hypothalamus does to your body, and you want to promote a narrative that the Earth is heating up, you would do stuff to fuck up the clouds.
That's a fact. That is a fact.
So that's why I wanted to go down this very methodically, right?
Yes.
Number one.
No, I appreciate that's why I wanted to talk to a brilliant engineer like you.
Really educate people. Number one, the Earth is an intelligent system. Heat comes from the sun. The Earth knows how to get rid of all of it and maintain this beautiful temperature like your body does. The models that they did to predict this process did not include clouds. And just to again restate, the models that they had cannot answer anything because they're predicting all different amounts of ice will melt on the Arctic from 0% to 100%, which means their models are invalid because they're not evidence. Evidence is this very basic stuff. I want to repeat this. Everyone gets this. So they did not include clouds. So they know that the clouds know how to modulate temperature. So now, winding back from that, Jim, if we want to associate a conspiracy here, the logical conclusion would be, why are you fucking around with the clouds? Because if you're doing
that's an excellent point.
That means it would be someone coming in and playing with your hypothalamus in your brain. Okay. Because if you did that, your body would know how to maintain your temperature. Sometimes your temperature would go up. Sometimes it would come down. Maybe you purposely want to screw around someone's hypothalamus. Okay. So if you know that clouds were not included and your deck of cards is going to fall apart, you actually use clouds, you manipulate clouds, because now the clouds cannot function how they're supposed to do. Okay. In engineering, they're called the controller. So if the clouds are the controller,
that's right,
which can sense the temperature and adjust, then you go screw around with the brains of the Earth's climate system, which is the clouds.
Are you familiar with Jasper Kirkby? He did what's called the Cloud Project, Cosmics Leaving Outdoor Droplets. And in that study, he had a cloud chamber. And in it, he introduced simply water vapor, a cloud seed from a coniferous plant, and GCR, galactic cosmic rays. That was all that was necessary to create a cloud. Uh-huh. Now, this flew in the face of all climate science models up to this point, which assumed that pre-industrial times were less cloudy because there was an assumption that sulfuric acid played a role in increase in cloudiness. So what he actually came to the conclusion was that not only do rainforests and trees produce their own clouds, they produce their own rain, they self-regulate. This actually threw off every single climate model that had been produced to date because they assumed that sulfuric acid played a key role. So it just accentuates what you're saying here. They don't understand cloud formation at all.
The key point here is, Jim, what you use the word self-regulation. Intelligent systems know how to self-regulate. So
that's right.
Everyone listening needs to understand clouds are they're the intelligence of the Earth's climate system. They know how to modulate if the Earth's surface temperature gets too hot. They know how to modulate the cloud structures to dissipate the heat. Alternatively, if the sun gets too cold, right, the clouds know how to retain heat, okay? So this is very important to understand. It's like, no matter what goes on, the clouds know how to manipulate it, to support us. So now, Jim, everything you want to share here, if you now go in to look at the I think you want me to share this, right?
Yes.
So there's two ways. So if you screw up the clouds, which you may be doing from flights, right? The amount of particles. I think, Jim, some people may not know how clouds form. The example you gave, you had gamma rays, you had conifers, which is a nucleus. Clouds need something to nucleate onto. They need a seed. Okay. So clouds need a seed. Okay. People need to understand that. No different. And from that seed, which is typically some particle, right? And then
and just for clarification, dust, mold, bacteria, there are many different aerosols, but that can form a cloud seed. But most of them are natural. Some of them are man-made, and especially given the difference between airplane pollution and any other type of pollution is where it occurs that makes it so damaging. So whether it's intentional government secret program or it's just pollution, the fact that it occurs at 49,000 feet is the problem, because that's where you're introducing cloud seeds. There's only a certain amount of available water vapor for it to condense on. So the whole chemtrail versus contrail argument is a semantic one, because to anyone who says they are simply contrails, you just have to ask them the question, condensing on what? And that's the part that's left out of the conversation. It's the contrail conundrum that they don't want to focus on the cloud seeds themselves.
Yeah, but the bottom line is that clouds need a seed, right? There have been many particles throughout eons that clouds have used, et cetera, right? Now, if you start injecting, and we have these artificial particulates coming out of airplanes, right? Now you're going to perturb the natural process of clouds, right? Or cloud seeding itself. You're going to perturb that entire process. Again, Jim, it comes down to how much, right?
Right.
How much is this happening, right? And because if you want to throw something off of its homeostasis, right, you have to do something significant to put it into something we call allostasis in system science. Homeostasis is where it maintains. So if they've been doing experiments for years in geoengineering, or it could be the fact that we're flying airplanes, right? And the amount of airplanes.
The earliest examples I have are 1958. Mm-hmm. And this is the city of Palm Springs. And in the weather modification history section of climateviewer.com, you can go to our newspaper vault. And we have 849 newspapers dated back to the 1800s. In 1958, the city of Palm Springs said that our economy is predicated on our sunshiny days. However, the skies look like a mob of exuberant skyriders making vapor trails that block out the sun. And the Air Force basically met with them 2 months later in January 1959 and said, well, you're at the intersection of all flights on the West Coast. So either move the city of Palm Springs or deal with it. And what most people today think, this is just this is a new phenomena, but it's not. Like, since we've, since we've had flight, they have been disturbing the natural processes of cloud formation. 1946, when the GE Labs invented cloud seeding, legitimate cloud seeding, as they like to say, with silver iodide. It was less than a year later they were attempting to steer hurricanes with Project Cirrus, and in 1949, Irving P. Crick invented the ground-based cloud seeding generator, which operates through October through March of every single year in the United States, all along the Rocky Mountains. Now China is covering the entire Himalayan plateau in hundreds of thousands of cloud seeding generators. This is enough to alter the world's weather, not just China's weather. So that's where we have to kind of draw a line in how much of an intervention is this. It's getting to a monumental scale. So, of course, being that a lot of people, at least my followers, want me to dig deeply into this chemtrail phenomena, I lead with plane farts, because at the end of the day, I'm going to go with the facts and then we'll deal with the conspiracy later. The facts are that just the cloud seeds that are emitted from burning jet fuel at 1.5 million barrels of jet fuel per day in America, at 149,000 flights per day around the globe. When you're hearing numbers, this was June 2023, nature.com, 1 million tons of carbon black soot nanoparticles per year. The Indian Space Organization found 10,000 black carbon soot nanoparticles per square centimeter, 18 kilometers into the stratosphere. And they decided that the only place it could have come from was aviation jet fuel burning. So we have this monumental, man-made climate chaos that nobody wants to acknowledge. So of course, that's when in the infographic here, I reached out to the scientists, the top scientists in aerosol cloud interaction. Said I wanted to know what they thought. So Dr. Ulrich Schumann said at the ICAO Colloquium on Aviation and Climate Change 2010, we want less warming, more cooling contrails predictable for operational planning. Dr. Rangasai Halthori from the FAA Aviation Climate Change Research Initiative, when I did an interview with him, he said, quote, "We would like more contrail-induced cirrus clouds by day and none during the night." And the reason why is because, like we were talking about with albedo, solar radiation management, the geoengineering idea of putting artificial aerosols into the sky to reflect sunlight away to cool the planet. And the flip side to that is the Earth radiation management side, which they call cirrus cloud thinning. Because in order to stop that heat from being trapped at the surface and allow it to escape back to space so that we do have our homeostasis, Ulrich Lohmann and Blas Gasparini best said it in this paper called A Cirrus Cloud Climate Dial, that if we limited cirrus cloud thinning to high latitude winters or nighttime seeding, that we could, have the most beneficial effect on global warming. So what you have is you have three different, major scientists who are saying the same thing. What has been pollution since 1958, which has been just a convenient, cloud smattering coming from commercial aviation, we now need to engineer that to not trap heat at night, to that diurnal temperature range that we were talking about earlier, that they found on those 2 days, that we want to be able to control these clouds. So they've came up with an idea of biofuels for contrail control. And President Obama signed off an agreement with the European Union, China.
Jim, can you hold on a second?
Sure.
I mean, I appreciate you sharing all this, but let's just keep it simple, because
Certainly.
Look, the Earth knows how to regulate itself with clouds. okay, to maintain temperature. I want to keep this very, the bottom line is, if you perturb cloud formation, you're going to throw off the self-regulatory phenomenon, okay? So let's just keep it with the science here, because I want to understand how you intersect that with this. Because if you look at, this was the latest paper that came out by, some of Dick's colleagues, okay? And the paper's called the Iris effect, okay? And this was, so I'd like to go to, I want to keep it, so revisiting the Iris effect, okay? The Iris effect is the ability for the clouds to modulate themselves by, and so this is a wonderful paper which goes through, but the end of the point is this diagram, okay? So if you look at these two different cloud phenomenon, one organization of clouds helps the radiation leave the Earth, right, to cool it.
That's outgoing long wave radiation.
Yeah. And the other type of cloud formation allows the heat to be trapped. Okay. The key takeaway is that the clouds know how to modulate themselves based on the surface temperature. Now, let's just, if we understand that is the reality. And by the way, no one can argue with this. Again, clouds were not included in any of the climate change models. Now, if you have lots of airplane activity, are you saying that it's perturbing that cloud formation? Let's just keep it simple.
Yes.
Okay.
That by having a lot of artificial clouds.
Right.
Those are the two terms I use. I use the most simple terminology for it: artificial clouds and the plane farts. So the plane farts are the cloud condensation nuclei, right. The ice nucleating particles that are emitted from planes. And the artificial clouds are the man-made clouds that are interrupting the natural cycle of things.
Right. So if that is occurring, the question again in science is how much, okay? How much is that effect on perturbing the clouds? And then if it is, are you stating that is are you saying that's increasing heat, the surface temperature, or decreasing it, or just changing it?
I'm going to be blunt and say that I don't really have a clue to what degree. And my concern is that there are these arrogant scientists who clearly haven't talked enough to engineers about how how badly this could go for us.
Right. But if we just go, we're intersecting two different sort of areas right now. One is the beginning of this conversation is that the entire climate change models do not include clouds.
That's right.
And because they don't include clouds, none of their shit you can trust. It's just
their predictions are way off.
Right. So that's done. Okay. Now we're moving to the fact that
that based on those predictions that they're trying to wrest control of the global temperature through engineering.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is, yeah. So they're saying the climate is changing, right? But there's two things here, and we can't mix them both, right? One is we've had commercial aviation. Okay. Before we go into geoengineering, right? Commercial aviation has been taking place since the 1950s. And the point is that commercial aviation could be perturbing the formation of clouds, right? Then the issue is, what is that doing to our weather? All right. And the issue is we don't fully know what it's doing. Okay.
As far back as 1976, Wallace had a study on the possibility of weather modification by aircraft contrails, and he said that, quote, "It is likely that airplane contrails are changing the weather to a greater extent than present-day cloud seeding operations." And I think that goes without saying.
Let's stop right there, Jim. Let's just stop right there. Okay, one is commercial aircraft, and the other is this other stuff that's going on where people are actually doing cloud seeding, okay? So there's two different phenomenon. We have the climate change models are bullshit. We know clouds are involved in regulating the Earth's temperature. I just want to separate these two. The other is we've had commercial aviation for the last 80 years, right? Sorry, 70 years, right? Something like that.
Roughly.
So over those 70 years, The point is that the airplanes themselves are creating quote unquote clouds. The things that they're putting out are also creating nucleation, which is creating clouds, right? Or perturbing cloud formation. The issue is, what are airplanes doing then to affect either clouds, which then will affect which will perturb the self-regulation ability of the Earth, right?
Right.
I want to just frame the scientific question. If that's in fact the case, is it increasing temperature, reducing temperature, or is it just making the temperature, or essentially making weather chaotic? It's probably the latter, right? It's doing something.
I lean towards climate chaos.
Right, climate chaos. Right. So one is, I think it would be not unscientific to say all of this vast amounts of jet fuel coming out, the stuff that's the exhaust that's coming out, is affecting our weather. The issue is always how much, right?
Right.
Because is it like someone is in a huge room and one guy farts a little bit in a massive, is it one guy farting in
a bedroom
stadium
versus an auditorium?
Yeah, versus in your room, okay?
Right.
And is it you're farting in a room, excuse to use this disgusting thing, in a 100-square-foot room, or are you doing it in a huge stadium and no one sees it? You see, and this is what we have to be careful about.
Size matters.
Yeah, size does matter. It does matter. So I don't know if anyone's done that analysis.
That's the problem, is that when I spoke to the gentleman I went to the 2018 American Meteorological Society's annual meeting.
What did they say?
And when I talked to the guys from the University Corporation of Atmospheric Research, I said, what I've noticed is that there is no global rainfall sampling sensor network, where you literally just are looking at what is the fallout, doing spectrometry on rainfall samples. Tell me what chemicals are in there, so we can kind of get a global, at least, summary of what aerosols are raining out. Now, the fact that glaring omission of scientific data that's necessary, the alternative would be to literally have like flying GCMS, up there, doing real-time sampling, telling us at each level of the altitude, from the ground to the tropopause into the stratosphere, at each level, what is the density of, each element. We don't have that information.
I guess my question is, has anyone modeled any of this?
Modeling wise, I've been able to find just geoengineering models. You have the climate change models, but even in there, the aerosol cloud interaction sections of any of the IPCC reports are almost void.
That's what I'm trying to say. So the bottom line is that obviously the commercial aircraft and what they're doing is going to do some perturbation to cloud formation. We don't know how much, right? But the more important, and then you have actual geoengineering taking place, right? People shooting up, what is it, sodium iodide into the atmosphere, right?
Calcium carbonate, aluminum, titanium dioxide. There's even been discussions of, obviously sulfur, and then there's discussions of diamond dust, along with many other different ideas. But right now, the big talk from David Keith and Bill Gates is calcium carbonate is their drug of choice.
Right. So that's to nucleate, right, and to create clouds, right?
Wrong. See, this is the big misconception with the geoengineering, solar geoengineering. Solar geoengineering wouldn't even occur in the troposphere at all. It would be the gradual buildup of aerosols in the stratosphere because of their residence time. So the residence time of lofting chemicals in the upper troposphere, which would be the majority of jet aircraft pollution, is generally 2 weeks to maybe 2 to 4 months at best before it rains out. However, if you loft chemicals into the stratosphere, aka stratospheric aerosol injection, which is part of solar geoengineering, that can have a residence time of anywhere from several months to several years.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is, if aircraft flies around 30,000 feet, the clearance rate of that is within about 2 weeks. But if you
Correct.
put it up into the stratosphere, which is what Gates wants to do, that's about many months. And the analogy here is if you take a drug, right, into your body, an intervention, typically what the pharmaceutical companies are trying to track is what is a clearance rate? How long does
Right.
it take for your liver to get it out, right? So your body naturally, if you take like, if you have a headache today and you go take Tylenol or Advil, it's typically within, 72 hours, right? Your liver will clear it out, right? And that's called clearance rate. And now when we're applying that to these climate systems, you fly an airplane, right? Up in the 40,000 feet up. In about 2 weeks, you're saying whatever exhaust stuff would eventually get dissipated and cleared. But if you're seeding, whatever the techniques of the geoengineering, that can hang out there for 2-3 months. Is that what you're saying, Jim?
At a minimum 2-3 months in some
Okay.
of the cases, with especially with more of the engineered nanoparticles that they're talking about lofting,
Much even longer, you're
2
saying.
years, 3 years.
And what height are they putting them into? What's the altitude?
The typical height that they want to get them up to is about 60,000 feet.
Right. So it's double what an
However,
airplane flies at.
but we go right back to what the Indian Space Organization found, that 10,000 per cubic centimeter of carbon black soot from aviation fuel being burned was found in the stratosphere.
Uh-huh.
So that means that not only, this is what I'm trying to basically separate here for you, is that you have the clouds, and that's what everybody's focused on. What they're not focused on is the milky white background, which is what geoengineering actually attempts to create. So what Chuck Long was saying was that planes were creating a subvisual ice haze, which we technically do not consider to be a cloud, that is building up in the stratosphere over the decades.
Uh-huh.
So as we fly closer towards the tropopause, which you can see many cases, if you go to ADSB Exchange and you look at the flights and what their current altitudes are, that many of these planes are flying like right on the tropopause. And when you have evidence,
which is what, like 50,000? 40,000?
it's different depending on where you are in the world. In fact,
Which airplanes are you talking about? I mean, most commercial flights claim they don't go over 40,000.
I mean, I could bring it up live for you right now and show you many planes flying, over 49,000, some of these 52, 56,000 feet.
Commercial aircraft?
Yes, private planes. In addition to military planes. Now, the military planes, they actually have a special set of additives called a high thermal stability additive, where they put a triple cocktail of chemicals into the jet fuel to keep it from freezing at high altitudes, so they can fly into the stratosphere. And they're extra dirty. Let's just put it that way.
No, I know military planes. I know, privates can go up to around 49,
I've seen some at 62.
I say privates.
I think that's about the highest I've seen on adsbexchange.com. And
So,
they
so
have,
Jim, what's your point? Are you saying that the commercial flights are causing this because of our aviation industry, are causing
Right.
climate chaos?
that it basically in 1970, the state of Illinois,
No.
and New Jersey.
Before you go there, just answer that question.
Yes.
Are you saying that
Certain.
let's just
This-
keep it the commercial?
This is the $1 million question. Is it intentional, or is it just, they don't give a fuck?
Okay,
That's really the
your-
question.
Okay, so your thesis is that, put aside this sort of forced geoengineering, that commercial aviation itself is the geoengineering. Is that what you're
Right. That is my
all right.
basic thesis, that whether
So
whether
that
you
gives me something
throw
that- yeah.
throw conspiracy out,
Yeah, so you're
based
saying-
simply on observational data that we know.
So commercial aviation is affecting the climate. Are they doing it on purpose, or is it just a side effect? That's a different question. But your point is that the commercial aviation is perturbing the climate. Is that
And that's why
yeah,
I brought up that infographic, because when you
yeah.
see what Ulrich Schumann is saying, less warming, more cooling contrails predictable for operational planning. When you see what the FAA's head of climate change says, Dr. Hal Thorey says, more cooling contrails by day, none during the night. We've left this paradigm of it's just pollution. And when Joe Biden's White House puts out a solar radiation modification, research agenda for the next 5 years, the European Commission puts out the same agenda, and in it they include three main topics: stratospheric aerosol injection, marine cloud brightening, and cirrus cloud thinning. You can't include that third one if you're not acknowledging the fact that someone clearly is trying to control the clouds and the pollution coming from planes.
But Jim, again,
for a desired outcome.
Yeah, but bringing it back to this core, your thesis here is that commercial aviation is the geoengineering phenomenon that's being done with purpose. One is for flying people around, but it is to put these particles up into the stratosphere, which sustain themselves for a long time and accumulate. That is being done to do this geoengineering. Is that what you're saying?
That's where the evidence goes. So yes.
Okay. So let's just because I'd like to keep things in this form where we can understand the core of what you're saying. So you're saying commercial aviation. Again, I want to repeat this again.
Pollution.
Yes, commercial aviation and the resulting pollution from commercial aviation is the geoengineering that's taking place. However, you're not sure if that's going to cause climate perturbations to the climate, which is increasing or lowering temperature, but you're asserting it's going to do climate chaos. It's going to just fuck up the climate and all that we don't fully understand.
It's back to what you were talking about with the homeostasis and the self-regulating system.
Yeah.
Another one that I had heard was called the claw process. The idea that ocean phytoplankton release dimethyl sulfide. Basically, phytoplankton fart when the planet gets too hot. They create clouds. Those clouds cool the planet. Phytoplankton die off, and the cycle repeats itself. Right. I could come up with 10 to 20 of these types.
Let me just keep it simple to the body, right? If you look at the body knows how to self-regulate. There's a lot of evidence saying in certain cultures, how women get menopause, where they get all hot flashes, right? They start sweating. There's certain foods that have been taken out of our diet. There's a significant amount of evidence that shows in certain cultures, women didn't have these high fluctuations in their temperature because they got certain nutrients, okay? Mm-hmm. And so the issue is, if you're perturbing a system and the system knows how to self-regulate itself with the clouds, right?
Right.
And now you're injecting garbage into it or removing stuff that should be there either way. In this case, you're injecting pollutants into it, that's going to perturb the actual temperature or weather. Let's just call it weather modification, right?
Right.
And so you're saying in order to cover up the pollutants being caused by commercial aviation, they're saying, climate change is taking place over there. Is that part of your assertion too, Jim?
Yeah. At the end of the day, they're trying to blame CO2 for,
yes.
And they know what, here's the gaping hole in all of our models. Guess what? It happens to be clouds.
Right.
Oh, but by the way, if you talk about those clouds, we're going to label you a conspiracy theorist because you called them chemtrails. That's the ridiculousness of the world that we live in. We can't have a factual conversation about.
But I would argue this, Jim. I think if we keep it to the fact that the clouds are used to regulate temperature.
That's a fact. They are the greenhouse. Would you agree with that terminology?
Well, to stabilize weather, okay, on the Earth, right? Clouds know how to do it. They can handle all. They're pretty robust, right? Clouds come in form, and that's what this. This is Dick Lindzen, by the way, who published this, was the youngest guy accepted to the National Academy of Engineering. He was a professor. When I did the video exposing the entire Paris Accords, a few months later, Dick did a letter to Trump saying, "Don't get out of the Paris Accords." That video that I did, I think, got like 50 million views. But Dick's letter basically said, get out of the Paris Accords. And the other phenomenon was 140 professors at MIT attacked him. Now, Dick was the youngest person accepted to the National Academy of Engineering, and he was the head of the meteorology group at MIT. But the point is that clouds know how to regulate the weather, okay, or temperature, a bunch of things. They're self-regulating. Now you're saying that with commercial aviation, we've put so many pollutants up in the stratosphere, they're perturbing this self-regulating ability of our Earth system.
I would take it a step further, and say that it is in the nature of man to try to control everything, and especially any type of
but
resources.
Jim, are you saying that they're doing commercial aviation as a front to cover this?
I would say that
I just want to be clear on this, because
it's kind of a complicated topic, because at the same time, I cannot say for certain that they know what their desired outcome is, because I've seen peer-reviewed journal publishings that say Greenland ice sheet melts more when it's cloudy. So they're, on the one hand, they're saying these clouds are definitely creating more heat. That's it's trapping heat at the ground. And then on the other side, I've seen numerous documents saying, well, it's actually creating a cooling effect. And if we just, now they have what's called climate optimized routing of flights.
But Jim, let's just stay on topic here on this one issue before we jump around. Clouds self-regulate the temperature. Okay.
Correct.
Now we've had commercial aviation, which are putting pollutants up into the stratosphere, you're asserting, and they don't clear out within weeks, right?
Right.
I just want to keep this very rational and logical. So, and they are putting out other particulates that are affecting weather. Again,
all true.
Altering weather, right? But we've been doing commercial aviation. Are you saying that when they fly an airplane, they're putting out other stuff to alter it purposefully, or this is just a side effect? Just let's just focus on that.
That alone is what I go back to when I try to reason with people who believe there is a conspiracy. When I try to reason with them, I say, you have to be able to prove intent to be able to say, this is a nefarious plan. This is a government.
But what I'm saying is, Jim, we've been doing, we take an airplane from point A to point B, okay? People fly around. We're in the modern age. Are you saying that they're doing, I'm not sure what you're saying. Are you saying commercial flights are taking place to cause climate change?
I'm saying that as a result of jet fuel being burnt at that altitude, we are altering the weather and the climate systems.
Period. Right. You don't know if that's being done, but you don't know if it's being done.
And based on the statements of leading climate scientists, like from the Federal Aviation Administration's Aviation Climate Change Research Initiative, when they're doing studies to test biofuels for contrail control, when they're doing contrail cirrus prediction tools, the Aviation Environmental Design Toolkit, which is built into the next gen transportation system, when they're implementing all these systems of control to get a desired effect, which is a net cooling, that basically the albedo effect of what they're creating, what they have been, what, as they put it, an uncontrolled experiment for 70 years is now becoming a controlled experiment in cooling the planet. Does that make more sense?
Jim, I really want us to focus on this thing. Commercial aviation puts out pollutants, okay? You're saying the clearing stays in the stratosphere, all right? That is affecting climate, yes?
Certainly.
Okay. Now, the next jump is, this is what I'm not getting from you, and if we just focus on this, Are you saying commercial aviation is being done to manipulate the weather?
I mean, obviously it's not, because when you order something from Amazon, UPS flies a plane and delivers you something. So that is why the plane went in the air.
Right, right. So let's
But
just
is
stop right there.
somebody
Yeah.
in?
So
Yeah,
commercial air flight is occurring for other reasons, right? But
clearly.
I think what we can say is that commercial flight, right, is causing some perturbations to the weather. And we could just end there, right?
It would be it would be that simple. However,
Oh yeah,
it,
but that's probably true what we just said. Now the second
without a doubt, it is changing the weather.
right. So
But without a moratorium,
now you're jumping to something else. So okay, so we agree with that. Clouds self-regulate. Commercial aircraft since 1950s may be perturbing the weather. We don't know how much, but now you're jumping to another point, and you're saying what that
that
Yeah.
now with this climate narrative post
Yep.
COP21, that they're zeroing in on carbon taxes and carbon credits.
Yep.
They're targeting the airline industry, saying, well, your carbon emissions are X. And in order for you to get, to a balanced state, you need to come up with some offset plan, which is the Cirrus Cloud thinning, which is all of these different ideas. Well, we'll make clouds by day, none by night. That way we actually have a net cooling and we won't get taxed out of the sky. Now, you can read this in many of the industry, journals that they have. In the peer-reviewed science journals, where they talk about cirrus clouds coming from planes and how they can control them with biofuels or cirrus cloud thinning. So, what was just a pollution that happened as a part of daily commerce is now become an active experimental playground for the climate engineers. Does that make sense?
Okay, and to what purpose? To what? Cool the earth?
To, instead of creating clouds that are trapping heat at the surface as they believe they are now,
Right.
to create cooling clouds during the day, which can then be removed by nighttime,
Right.
if that's even possible.
Right. Okay, so what you're saying is, okay, so we all agree, I know I'm repeating this, clouds self-regulate the temperature. Phase, then there was this phase that we started doing commercial flights. Commercial flights started perturbing it, and now they're saying, okay, let's start using these commercial flights when they're doing, maybe injecting. They're going to put out some other output to create different kinds of clouds, which can cool the earth during the day. That's what you're saying. Like they're actually you can literally read it when you order Amazon. That Amazon flight is also putting out some additives, right, as it flies to effect. Is that what you're saying?
That's a possibility. So one of the big ones is Amazon uses its EC2, its cloud AWS clouds computing services for geoengineering modeling and comparison projects. Google artificial intelligence working with United Airlines to route flights around contrail producing regions of the sky. In this climate optimized routing of flights. This just happened last month. It's been going on for the last year. So when you have these major corporations all coming together with artificial intelligence, predictive programming to route flights to places where they will create cirrus clouds at one time, which will create a cooling effect, but not if they're going to trap outgoing long wave radiation.
Yeah. But Jim,
let's just trying to
look. I just want to. We acknowledge that commercial airline. When I order something, I'm not doing that to cloud seed, right? I'm ordering something.
You just want your stuff delivered.
Yeah,
correct.
But what you're now saying is that there's a conscious effort by whoever to use commercial aviation to manipulate the weather,
global temperature.
Right, but using aviation, commercial aviation.
Correct.
Okay.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt.
All right. So that's what I wanted to get to. Okay. So it's not like there could be geoengineering going here, but they're actually using commercial aviation to do this and sort of hide what's going on. It's a way that you camouflage
Correct. It's a geoengineering pollution solution.
Right. But you're saying commercial aviation is being used for geoengineering. It before was just a side effect, and now it's being actively used for geoengineering.
And this is based on
No,
the
no,
study.
but Jim, that's what you're
Yes,
saying, right?
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, before we jump
100%.
in,
That's exactly
that's
what
what
we
you're
said.
saying. So anyway, that's what I wanted to get clear. What I want to do is, it's 10:28. I just want to, I want to play a video here just for our audience. Everything we're discussing here, people understand, and that's why I've been taking it slow, Jim, is most people, the problem is if this isn't discussed methodically in this way, it falls into this area of, I don't know what. And then people, the real issues get covered up. I notice in election systems, there are real issues like signature verification and let's say chain of custody. These are real fundamental issues. And then the whack jobs come in and they take the real issues and they start talking about all sorts of other cray shit. And then the real issues never get addressed. So that's why I wanted to be very, very meticulous here in this conversation.
And that's why I wanted to have this discussion with you.
What happens is, you know, there's a real stuff going on. And then people in the government, if they do not want people to understand stuff, they actually throw other crazy shit in there. You know, in the case of election systems, we discovered fundamental systems issues, signature verification, chain of custody. Trump and Mike Lindell came into it, and the Trump people, and they made a shitload of money off of my work. They made about $250 million or more, but they started talking about crazy shit, which made it so crazy that you couldn't really bring people together on the fundamental issues, you see, that are real. And every issue becomes like this. You know, there are real issues with the fact that government controls social media companies, but then they add all sorts of other shit. So you let the criminals like Elon Musk get away, all right? Because he's part of it. So that's why I wanted to take this very methodically and very scientifically from an engineering standpoint, because many people have asked me to discuss geoengineering, and I purposely stayed away from it because it's like, sorry to use a word, no pun intended, the whole thing becomes very cloudy. Okay.
Right.
So I just want people to understand, if you take it from a systems standpoint, there is an Earth-Sun system of how much heat gets formed in the Earth, but the Earth is a very smart, intelligent system using clouds. It knows how to dissipate the heat. We maintain proper temperature. Over here, I hope that stuff is right here, that body of knowledge, that conversation. The second thing you're talking about is commercial aviation since the 1950s has been putting pollutants in the atmosphere, which may be perturbing temperature, period. All right. We don't know how much, but it is to some extent.
Or which direction.
Yeah, but we don't. And the problem is, it's unfortunate that no real research has been funded to do that. To me, that's really the problem. Why isn't there research really?
It's the glaring omission.
Right. So how is that affecting clouds? The third piece that we're talking about is, are there forces which are now using commercial aviation purposefully to do geoengineering? And we'll come back and talk about that. But I just want to let everyone know, everything that, Jim, you know I do, I like to take a systems approach. We want to train people to take a systems approach. So you start looking at the real things, because there's so much bullshit nowadays. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry, you know, we've seen at the GOP debates, right? Mm-hmm. The same guy 5 months ago, this brown guy that they found out, I call him the big farmer brown noser, Vivek the Snake. 6 months ago, he's saying, oh, yeah, climate change is real. We got to stop it, right? But at the debates, he's saying, oh, yeah, it's a hoax. But they don't describe what the hoax really is. So they're just saying stuff just to get votes on either side. And pandering on either side. So we want to get to the truth. And that's why people really need to understand how systems work. And when you understand how systems work, you can use it for understanding how your physical body works, right? How to make it healthier. You can understand what we just went through, how the climate system works, how the immune system works, how political systems work. And that's what I'm dedicated to doing, Jim, is educating people on a systems approach to everything. And we take a systems approach, you start seeing who the real enemies are and what we need to do. So I just want to play a quick video for people, and then we'll come back, because I really want everyone listening here, hopefully this video will inspire you why we need to take a systems approach. and why, it took me, I used to teach the course at MIT on this, Jim, to, people used to pay tons of money for this, but I want to make systems thinking, system science accessible to all people. Because if they do that, then we can start having intelligent conversations and winning people on all different sides over, versus right now there's something real going on, but then people say wackadoodle shit, and then the stuff gets put into the fringes. You know what I'm saying? Versus so let me just play this video and we'll be right back.
We have allowed our country to be taken over from within, and the end goal is you will have a homogenized world where we will become slaves, because there is a condition among the elites that really thinks they're better than you, deep down inside them, that you don't deserve the freedoms you have. They don't. This reality is what people need to wake up to, and we need to all unite, working people. There's only one movement that can do that, and that is the movement that we started creating here in Massachusetts, the movement for truth, freedom, and health. Look, I've been a student of politics since I was a 4-year-old kid, studying revolutionary movements, left wing, right wing. There's a physics, there's a nuclear science to destroying the establishment. To build a bridge, you need to understand Newton's equation. You need to understand the laws of gravity. You need to understand Poisson's ratio. There is a way to build a revolution. And that's why I put this together. My goal is to train an army of truth, freedom, and health leaders. We don't need followers like social media. We need leaders, but they need training, because the educational system does not teach them history, nothing. So in 3 hours, that's what I've started doing. That's the solution. We got to train people. First, with understanding what a system is, the dynamics of all systems that affect nature. The second is understanding the interconnection between truth, freedom, and health. Freedom is the ability to move freely, communicate freely, talk freely. Without freedom, you cannot convert ideas, hypothesis into truth, which is science. And without freedom, you can't really get to truth. And without truth, you make up fake problems and fake solutions, which means you destroy our health. And without health, which is the infrastructure of us and our body, you can't fight for freedom. Truth, freedom, health. Third concept is it has to be bottoms up. Working people, people who work uniting. And what the right wing has done is whenever you say working people unite, that must be communist. Meanwhile, they've let the Democrats run unions, which suppress workers, completely corrupt. But when you look at the arc of American history, it's been when working people came up. We need to go local. Every solution I'm coming up with as a part of this movement, we're giving the science, which is the truth, and then we tell people what they can do on the ground. Like with election fraud, you don't need to wait for some lawyer. Our goal is to train people to go local, to go local, to go local, fight locally. Forget lawyers, forget politicians, forget celebrities. You got to learn politics, and there is a science to it. They lock us down, we should be ready to shut them down. And the fourth part of this principle is the not so obvious establishment. So when you look at a system, there's always something that disturbs you from getting to your goal. Well, the biggest disturbance is the not so obvious establishment, which are those people who claim they're for you, on the left and the right. The Al Sharptons who tell black people I'm for you. The Tucker Carlsons. Do you think any true anti-establishment person will ever be on Fox or CNN? I don't think so. They both mislead working people back into the establishment. Without this solid understanding of political physics and theory, you're screwed. You're going to follow on the left wing Bernie Sanders. Oh, he said something. Or Robert Kennedy. Scumbags. Or you're going to follow some right-wing talk show host. They're not going to lead us to liberation. It's us. We're building a bottoms-up movement, and that political physics, it's a nuclear science of change. Bottoms up. We have to organize to understand that there is people who talk a good game and then look at what they actually do, left and right. I'm sorry, Sean Hannity may say some good things, but I don't see the urgency in his voice to get something done, and it can only come when you weaponize yourself with the right knowledge. You need to be able to identify a rat. You know, Christ didn't go after the Romans, right? It was the Pharisees and the Sadducees who screwed him up. His own quote-unquote people. And that's where we're at. So these four concepts I've built into a curriculum where people can go to truthfreedomhealth.com, and it's an educational program. We need to train people in political theory. You need to have physics, and I've created that curriculum. People need to get educated. We need to get educated fast. And within a half an hour, I can teach people. 2 years of MIT control systems, I teach people those concepts. Then I apply it, anyone can understand it. And then you say, oh, I got to build a bottoms-up movement. They have to get politically astute, and then they have to go locally and act, not sit there on social media. They have to act locally, defy locally, do civil obedience locally, but with knowledge on how to build a movement. The Senate campaign's expanded to the Movement for Truth, Freedom, and Health, and they can find it on truthfreedomhealth.com. So people can sign in, they can get access to a bunch of videos. If they want to take a course and become a Truth, Freedom, Health leader, I offer a full scholarship there. But we want people to make a commitment that they'll study, that they'll get certified, that they'll go do activities on the ground. So go to truthfreedomhealth.com.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Dr. Shiva. I do a couple of important things, and we'll talk more about this. Everyone knows I'm running for president of the United States. Everyone should go get one of these bumper stickers. Jim, if you haven't gotten one, get one.
I'm on it.
The nice thing is you get one of these bumper stickers, 100,000 people see it. It's far better than social media. The real social media is going to be offline. The other thing is every Thursdays at 11 a.m. and at 8 p.m., we do a open house. It's a long day for me because the 11 a.m. session goes from 11 to 2 or sometimes 3. The 8 p.m. sometimes goes from 8 to 11 p.m. All right, but we do it. It's a global audience, but you'll really start understanding this notion of why we have to build a bottoms-up movement, why each one of you needs to become Truth, Freedom, and Health warrior scholars, because the conversation we're having today is something on geoengineering that you probably won't get anywhere else. And just to be clear, Jim, we're not talking right today in this conversation, because that's a whole nother conversation about geoengineering that's being done in other ways where people are sending, there's a whole bunch of ways like HARP and all these kinds of things people talk about. Today's conversation is we're focused on commercial aviation, right? And the fact that commercial aviation itself is being used to do geoengineering. And to those of you who joined us late, we began the conversation really by reviewing the fact that there is no field called climate science. There isn't. Okay, it's a made-up field. The field is actually fluid mechanics and radiative physics, which have existed for many, many years. They're the real guts, the scholarly guts of it. And when the IPCC tried to scare everyone that the Earth's temperature is going to go up, they based it on mathematical models, which have no basis in evidence, because the models predict all these different answers from 0% ice melting in the Arctic to 100% and all different flavors in between. But the key thing in summary we talked about is none of those models included clouds, okay? And clouds are the regulating factor of the Earth's temperature. Clouds, and then I just shared before we took a break that this is an important paper that came out several years ago. It's called the Iris Effect. It's a wonderful paper because it's written, and the paper really goes into the fact that the clouds came out in 2011 are very intelligent. They actually know how to let more heat out or let more heat in. Like here, the clouds form to let more heat out or keep heat in. And so the clouds are very similar, this paper argued, to the iris of your eye, which knows how much light to put it, if the iris closes if I'm shining a bright light on me versus opens up, the dark. Having said that, Jim and I had a conversation then to give his thesis and his research of the fact that commercial aviation over the last 70, 80 years has really fucked up the environment, right? Putting out pollutants. And these pollutants have likely caused perturbations to our climate. And the unfortunate thing, the third point, is that no one's really done research on how much. There's no scientific research really funded, okay, to really understand how much the commercial aviation industry has affected climate, right?
Right.
And the fourth thing right before we ended was your point was
that we've basically gone from pollution, unintentional pollution, to controlling it,
right. So
for a desired outcome.
Right. But the key point you're saying, Jim, is that commercial aviation now, this is the fourth point, is being used as a vehicle to do geoengineering. And that's where we ended right before we took the break, right?
Right.
Okay. So we just want because a lot of people in the chat are saying, what about HARP? What about this? We're not, that's a whole different conversation. Today, we wanted to really educate people on the fact that commercial aviation puts out pollutants and particles which linger not for weeks, but for months, likely in the upper atmosphere. And those things did cause climate chaos. We don't know how much. I haven't, I have to do more research on this. And you're saying very little research was done on that. But then in this fourth part, people are actually using commercial aviation to manipulate the environment. Is that right, Jim?
That's correct.
Okay.
So, what we have, as far as evidence, I only know of one scientist in the world who's even looked into this. And the anti-geoengineering groups, the NGOs of the world, like the ETC group, if you bring this up with them, they'll just basically give the blanket statement, this is not a thing. But when you talk about Chuck Long, NOAA Earth Systems Research Lab, evidence of clear sky daylight whitening, are we already conducting geoengineering? And he used the baseline surface radiation network along with multiple other sensors to come to this conclusion that basically planes are lofting chemicals into the stratosphere, whether they reach the stratosphere or not.
Commercial, but Jim, again, let's keep commercial aviation. You're saying
commercial aviation,
right?
At roughly 110 to 130,000 flights per day. Mm-hmm. That as a aggregate, their chemicals are making it into the stratosphere. Evidence gathered, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt.
And what is the purpose? Because before it was pollutants that we said they're just causing climate chaos. But now you're saying that they're putting certain pollutants in to manipulate the climate. Is that what you're saying? Before it was just random.
So to one of the geoengineers, David Keith came.
But Jim, answer that question. Before it was random. Now it's being directed.
Now they are intentionally trying to control the jet fuel emissions to get a desired outcome.
Right.
Period.
Okay. Period. All right.
That when you look at the global bodies governing flights and jet fuel.
I think that's the takeaway, Jim. I think that's really the takeaway, right? The takeaway is what started as an anomaly to affecting the climate is now all these, in aggregate, all of commercial aviation is being used to manipulate the climate.
Right. And we could, basically it comes down to this, like there's this divide in the online activist community regarding this subject. You got you have this. It's like what you said about the people who introduced the bullshit. Okay. Yeah. So on the one hand, you have the Dane Wigingtons of the world who say planes cannot create contrails at all. Everything is a pump or a pipe. And then on the other side, there's me going, we can have both. There is evidence. I have Freedom of Information Act requests from not only the Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the United States Navy at the China Lake, California, that they both agreed, 1994 FOIAs, that they would use carbon black dust for cirrus cloud creation / suppress contrail cirrus. And they said why. They took it a step forward. Dr. Arnold J. Barnes from the United States.
Can you just, sorry to intervene, I just want to just get clarity here. You said there's two sides. Side one is what, and side two?
Side one is there is pollution that's being taken advantage of to get a desired outcome. Mm-hmm. The side two is intentional weather warfare manipulation and the military agenda behind it. And in that side, we are not talking about just jet fuel being burned. We're talking about chemicals, pumps, pipes, dumps.
Right. So you're saying that group, when you bring this up, they say, oh, this is not happening. It's only that other thing.
It's only the other thing. And I'm going, why cannot both things be true?
I think the analogy with the election system stuff is that other group could just be saying that to basically make some outlandish claims so people discount the whole thing.
Exactly. And that's my point all along has been that when I said earlier, 1970, the state of Illinois and New Jersey sued the airline industry for what they referred to as smoke pollution of the skies.
Okay.
Because basically planes were blocking out the sun. If people look at that, then they go, well, this has been happening for a long time. But then you go and you flip the script and you start talking about weather warfare, and you have the Arnold J. Barnes.
No, I get it. I get what you're saying. I just want to be cognizant of time, because I have we can.
I'll summarize very quickly.
Yeah.
That Arnold Barnes said, we want to make clouds to block out spy satellites and increase nighttime operation capability. So blocking out moonlight at night, we have night vision. The Iraqi Republican Guard does not. We create clouds for this purpose. So these are the military reasons that were stated at a joint Army Air Force meeting. So you can have both, and both can be going on at the same time. You also have the CIA funding the climate intervention studies, going to geoengineer Alan Robach saying, can another country control the weather over America, and would we know? And at the same time, the CIA was involved in Operation Popeye, weather warfare over Vietnam. They were involved in creating droughts in Cuba in 1961, Project Nile Blue. This led to the weather warfare ban of 1978. So where I'm at is to clarify all of the above. The Environmental Modification Convention of 1978 banned weather warfare and any long-lasting effects on weather control manipulation that have, loss of life as a mechanism. The problem is that they never made a way for you to catch anybody in the act or any kind of verification regime. So to kill two birds with one stone, the gaping hole in the climate models you're talking about, and to bring clarity and kill off a lot of conspiracy, we could create a sensor network to detect the fallout that would inevitably occur if somebody were doing weather modification technologies or weather warfare, or just introducing chemical additives to jet fuel that weren't there before that are affecting cloud cover. So what I would propose is the government create a sensor network, but because I don't trust the government and they can turn their sensor networks off like they did after Chernobyl, after Fukushima, they turned off the EPA's radiation detection network, that we create a citizen-powered network of sensors in your backyard to collect rainfall samples, to analyze the chemicals, have an all-sky camera, measures long-wave, short-wave radiation, and video, just video of your cloud, the clouds over your house, along with your regular temperature data, maybe even radiation and, EMF frequency. If we were to collect all of this data in real time and report it to a map and amend the weather warfare ban of 1978 to say, we need to know in advance before you modify the weather. And if you don't, you just violated NMOD. And it's similar to the Limited Test Ban Treaty when they banned upper atmospheric nuclear explosions. They said you can't blow up nukes above the ground anymore. Then the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty Organization created the International Monitoring System, which was seismographs, infrasound recorders, interferometers to detect and triangulate where a nuclear bomb explodes. So bans are no good without something, trust but verify. So without a system to actually catch somebody in the act of intentionally modifying the climate or doing weather warfare, we will always have this, it's just a conspiracy. And
So Jim, I think the key thing here is, what we focus on is building this bottoms up movement. And when we're trying to engage people to do anything like this, right, there has to be this process of education. And that's why I wanted to take this methodically. What's fundamentally happened is most people are not even aware of the concept of a system. Most people are not even aware of this concept of a self-regulating system. Most people are not even aware of what the clouds do, right? So I'm a big proponent of, once you teach people these principles, right, then they can apply it to weather systems. They can apply it to everything. And then you can mobilize people to take an action. But we need a conscious citizenry first. And that conscious citizenry today does not exist because 30% don't want to learn, 50% are just sitting on their asses watching which way the wind blows. The
Watching
opportunity,
football.
yeah, we have opportunity with the 20%. And if you're going to deal with the 20%, they need to get some fundamentals under their thing. So I think as people review this video, I think the main thing that people need to understand is that the earth is an intelligent system. Your body is an intelligent system. Everything is in a system, and systems have the ability to self-regulate. However, you can throw systems off course if you start fucking with them, like putting crap in them that don't belong there. Okay. And, you know, poisons in your body, right? Or not getting
Right.
proper nutrition. Your body will go into allostasis, where your body is obese and you think being 300 pounds overweight is normal. So it's happening in this country, you know. The average American right now, Jim, is going to the life expectancy in the United States is now going down. If you have a child, your child is going to live less than you, okay? Meaning have a lower life expectancy than you. And this is a systems problem. It could be with pollution. It could be with, you know, stress in people's lives, right? Income inequality. It's a whole bunch of things. It's not any one thing. So when we talk about this climate thing, and I think people go review this, number one, the earth is a very intelligent system. So if we've been flying airplanes, like you're saying, since 1950s, Jim, what is that effect on climate? And I think the answer is we don't know, because no one's funded the research on it.
And even more importantly, what is the effect on human health of a
Right.
constant steady rain of heavy metals, which we know to be poisonous to the human
Well, I
body?
can tell you what that is. You know, every day, and as a systems biologist, it's all about dosage, Jim. It's how much you say, and over what period of time. If you were just walking by, you know, one time, you know, the back of a, you know, and you got a whiff of some jet fuel, okay, your body will clear it, you know. But
Right.
if you're doing that every day in what's called microdosing over a long period of time, again, this thing needs to be understood. It'll have some effect. But the point is, Jim, the fact is that very little research is being done on this. And I think that's what we can definitively take away. And I think, you know, as I want to close here, people do know I'm running for president. I don't think we've ever had an engineer, Jim, who understands sort of the magnitude of engineering system science ever run. And we live in a
not
world
that I know of.
yeah, and I don't think any of these presidential candidates could even have a conversation like this that we're having today. Okay, they would just say either take one side or another side and just try to get votes. But I think the bottom line is,
They would do a perception management audit. You know, do a
right.
perception audit of what the public. All right, well, the majority of the people want to hear you say this, and then that's what you would get up there and say.
Right.
And I appreciate your honesty and the methodical nature that you went through this conversation, because I am a chaotic person. I am your typical chaotic American. I have so many thoughts that it's hard to organize them. So
Yeah,
I look forward to
I'm
taking.
glad you're being honest, Jim, because
I am.
you have a lot of information. What's happening right now in the world is, because at a click of a button on these iPhones, you can get so much information. More information is not leading to more solutions. In fact, if anything, it's, you know, if people go to truthfreedomhealth.com, there's a very interesting graph. People go, let me bring it up. If people go to truthfreedomhealth.com, and by the way, that's where people can go to become a Truth Freedom Health warrior scholar. But let me just bring this up. If people go there, there's a very important graph that we have. The attention deficit that's going on, Jim, the inability for people to focus is an important thing that you're bringing up, because if you can't focus, we can't really grasp what the real problem is. And if people go to Truth Freedom Health, there's a very nice graph here that has a guy looking at tons of information. I don't know if you can see it, Jim.
Yeah.
But just because we have lots of information doesn't mean the world is getting better. In fact, we have more people anxious and depressed, more people feeling hopeless. 2.5 billion people are obese, right? In the world, it's going to go up to 4 billion in the next 5 to 10 years. 40% want to overthrow the government. So just because information doesn't mean we're getting better, because information through the lens of ignorance leads people into one of these states: illusion, confusion, right? They get complacent, desperate, or they, want to be in this left or right camp. And ultimately, the only way out of this is knowledge, which is not information, but it's the ability to connect the dots, right? The science of system that leads to wisdom. And that's what I believe we've been wanting to do in this conversation, Jim. That's why I was directing you so everyone leaves not saying, oh, we just went to some climate change thing, or a geoengineering thing, and sort of walks away. The bottom line here is we want to take a systems approach. And what we're leaving here with honesty is recognizing that all this commercial aviation is going on. We have very little information on how it's affecting our health, how it's actually affecting the climate, except your assertion is that the commercial aviation is being used to do geoengineering. And no one wants to talk about that. And that's being camouflaged likely with this other bigger thing. Oh my God, the military's doing it. They're trying to attack us. And there's the big elephant in the room, which is commercial aviation. No different than, the whole thing with the COVID stuff, right?
There are people that literally were making the argument online that planes were spraying COVID and Morgellons and nanobots and all of that sort of stuff. So when that's the kind of propaganda you have to overcome.
That's what I'm saying. And I think that's being done to make anything exposing it seem crazy. When the reality is big pharma's revenue was going down like this. Pfizer's revenue went from 65 billion to 40 billion in 2019. They needed the vaccine. And then Trump came in and beautifully lifted that up. Pfizer's revenue went from 40 billion up to 80 billion and now 100 billion. That's a big elephant in the room. And I think the big elephant in the room that you're bringing up is, wait a minute, there's all this commercial aviation going on, and that could be used for manipulating the weather. So anyway, Jim, I think this was great. We should do it again. But I think, to people listening,
I think that if we do it again, I would like to do it after finishing your course, because for me, these are very complicated topics, and being able to get them into the shortest format possible is very tough. And I think that your systems approach could definitely help me in educating other people with the information that I have.
Well, I appreciate that, Jim. And that's why, so the action step I want to impress on you, Jim, as well. And Jim, where are you out of?
Sumter, South Carolina.
Yeah. So Jim, when I'm running for president, we have a huge group of people in South Carolina. So as I close out, everyone go to shivaforpresident.com, get one of these bumper stickers. They're like $5. You're helping. You got a lot of great information today, but it's a way for you guys to participate in this. You can also go to shivaforpresident.com. There's another very nice diagram there, Jim, that actually a flyer. We want people to hand out these flyers to their local neighborhoods, right? To their friends, family at grocery stores. Let me bring up this flyer. This is where people can, it's great you put a bumper sticker. We want everyone to do that. But we also want people to go to the download section of Shiva for President. So if you go to the main page and you click free downloads here, Jim, you'll see there's a flyer here. And this flyer, you can download it. It's open sourced. You can put it on black and white. But notice this graph here, Jim. It says the lesser of two evils is killing your children. And if you look at this, since 1980 to today, the life expectancy in the United States is going down. This could be because of jet fuel. It could be because of Obamacare. It could be because of income inequality. It could be because of poisons, a whole bunch of things. It's not any one issue, but it's been going on since 1980. Democrats and Republicans have been screwing over people. But the bottom line is your child is going to have a shorter lifespan than you. And if you keep voting for the lesser of two evils, or these people just say whatever you want to hear, it's not going to get any better. And who's causing this? The swarm. So the left, and you can go look up who the swarm is. There's a video. And what's the solution is our campaign and learning, as you just said, Jim, the science of systems. And every Thursdays, we do a town hall, which I recommend everyone come to, because you'll really, and there it is, 11 a.m. and 8 p.m., vashiva.com/orientation. But this is really about life and death at this point, particularly for your children, because if you don't understand system science, you're going to one day look at some brown guy who they dug up out of God knows where to look like me. We call him Vivek the Snake. Seriously. And the guy, he's a Brahmin brown noser who is a fraud of the ultimate level, or they will indict Trump and they'll play theater there to get sympathy for him. So he raises another $100 million. Or they'll, put Booby effing Kennedy, who basically is another bullshitter. So the establishment is very clever at manipulating you. And the only way out of this is for you to become your own leaders and your own teachers and your own masters. And the science of systems is the fastest way to get there. So that's why truthfreedomhealth.com. And as I end, Jim, I just want to play our campaign video. And, our running for office gives everyone the opportunity to get involved. You can volunteer. We got to get on the ballot in South Carolina, North Carolina. You can help collect signatures. You can donate.
Help out there.
Yeah. So Jim, get involved. Come to our SHIVAforpresident.com. Sign up as a volunteer. Every Saturdays we do meetings. But more importantly, if you want to donate, every time you donate something to me, I give you books, I give you courses, because our campaign fundamentally, if you notice, is about truth, freedom, health. It's about elevating people's consciousness. It's about thinking. It's actually about learning how to think. Anyway, Jim, let me play this video, and it should inspire people to support our campaign for president.
Who would have ever thought I'd be running for president of the United States of America? I was born a low-caste untouchable in India's caste system, a system of aristocracy, oppression, and racism. My name is Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. I'm an MIT PhD, a Fulbright scholar, a scientist, engineer, entrepreneur, and inventor. My family and I left India to come to America on my 7th birthday. I grew up in the working-class neighborhoods of New Jersey, playing baseball, mowing lawns, painting houses, and coding software. My friends and neighbors are blacks, Italians, Irish, people of all races. As a 14-year-old, I wrote 50,000 lines of software code to create the world's first email system, and was awarded the first U.S. copyright for email, recognizing me as its official inventor at a time when copyright was the only way to protect software inventions. I did that long before I ever came to MIT, revealing that big innovations can occur anytime, any place, by anybody. Growing up, I saw politicians dividing us by race and religion in both America and India, to have us fighting each other while they remained safe in their gated communities and in their playgrounds of Hollywood, Martha's Vineyard, and Silicon Valley. I'm a fighter. I fought racism and exposed their imperialist wars, fought for workers, and put my life on the line against global corruption. I never wanted to run for political office. All that changed when I saw working Americans as never before being duped by the establishment and the not-so-obvious establishment. Across left and right, we were being sold out and made to forget why we came to America and why America existed. Lawyers, academics, billionaires, celebrities, and politicians, elites, Clintons, Kennedys, Bidens, Obamas, Bushes, black and white have hijacked America. They printed trillions for their friends. They delivered crumbling infrastructure, corruption, and racism. They've transferred trillions to themselves, dividing black and white, fear-mongering, and fake science. Lockdowns and censorship, dirty air, food, and water, pushing drugs upon us, making us sicker. We've been sold out. One set of rules for them and another for us. We deserve a warrior with a history of courage in putting everything on the line for you, who believes in you, not them, who has created a movement bottoms up for truth, freedom, health. I've exposed their lies at the right time, never waiting until it was popular. I've exposed their false gods who exist to lead you back to them. I've exposed their fake science of lockdowns and masking and provided you solutions to fight them and win and protect your immune system, saving millions. I exposed Fauci, galvanized the Fire Fauci campaign when others remained silent. When they stole our election, we sued the government and Twitter in our historic 2020 federal lawsuit, exposing in bare view the government and big tech censorship infrastructure, the unholy alliance between government and social media companies. Where was Elon and his grifters? They stood by the sidelines and did nothing. They did not use their megaphones to help us when it could have made a big difference. Now our movement grows for truth, freedom, health, independent of all of them. Every day, millions are learning the science of systems, the knowledge the elites do not want you to have, so you may learn how to think, stand up, and fight, independent of the establishment of left and right and their fake heroes. Now it's time for you to join the movement, to win back America, to win back truth, win back freedom, win back your health. That's why I'm running for President of the United States. This race is about you. This race is about truth, freedom, health. versus power profit control. We've had enough. They think we'll fall in line and vote again for their lawyers, celebrities, billionaires, and chosen ones from above. We choose our heroes from below, from the rank and file, who do what is right at the right time, not when it's convenient and popular. They can never represent us. What America needs is a movement by the working people, for the working people, who are educated, organized, decentralized, and fight for independence from their systems of control. And that movement exists. It's ready for you. We don't need them. We need us to go bottoms up, neighbor to neighbor. My journey, your journey are all the same. It's our time. It's time we had one of us. It's time to win back truth, freedom, health, to win back America. Be part of this historic movement, all the way to our victory on November 5th, 2024. If you're an American citizen, pledge your vote now for Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, the independent candidate for U.S. President. No matter where you live, you can be a part of this. Volunteer as little as 20 minutes a day. Don't delay. This is Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, and I approve this message, paid for by Dr. Shiva for President.
Guys, just a couple of messages. You can donate and volunteer at shivaforpresident.com. Every Thursdays, we do a 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. It's an open house. You get to meet incredible people from all over the world. Go to vashiva.com/orientation. I also wanted to thank, someone said, the Ray Infinity Show. Hello, Dr. Shiva. I'd like to have you on my show. Ray, if you want me on the show, just email me or at vashiva@vashiva.com or DM me on Twitter, and we'll get in touch. But or email me, vashiva, Victor Alpha Shiva, at vashiva.com, and I'll have Heather also touch base with you. And then I think, Jim, you wanted to give your website to people?
Yeah. So you can check me out at climateviewer.com or at climateviewer on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute. One of the other individuals I wanted to hook you up with is a gentleman that goes by the name Quite Frankly. And he's a good friend of mine. He has an absolutely huge audience. And politics is, his main wheelhouse. But from the very critical perspective that you bring to it, I'm sure that y'all would make for an excellent interview.
So you've been in touch with Heather. And by the way, to anyone listening, everyone knows that since we got out there, Jim, in 2020, we reach about 500 million people globally with our movement. The establishment was a little bit late to the game, and then they had to censor me, throw me off Twitter for exposing their censorship infrastructure. So now what they do is put me in a digital cage, Jim, and literally squeeze.
I'm right there with you. I've been proudly shadow banned since 2015.
So what we want to do is others, anyone out there who's a independent podcaster, I want to support you guys. So Jim, let Quite Frankly get in touch with Heather, and anyone else listening. You can reach out to me directly at vashiva@vashiva.com, because we want to support an independent network of people who are actually interested in doing bottoms-up journalism. Anyway, Jim, this was very valuable. Thank you for coming on, and I look forward to you becoming a Truth from Health warrior scholar.
I look forward to it too, because my wife is my biggest critic, and she's always said, "You're brilliant, but you're all over the place."
System science will help focus you, and that's what I was trying to do with you. But I think the more that I think you can, the reason we need to get focused is on any issue the establishment tries to do disinformation and bring out their cray-crays on every issue, right? And I believe there's the reality of what you're bringing up here. And then there's people talking about wacky shit, that the real stuff always gets hidden, subsumed by the wacky stuff. Anyway, Jim, it was great having you. Be well.
Thank you so much for having me, and never doubt that a dedicated group of small individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that has. And I really hope that the people who are dedicated to you make a difference, because I think you'd make a great president.
Well, look, we're already making a big difference. They're so scared of us, they don't even want to mention our name. And that invisibility that they're doing, Jim, is waking people even more up, because people remember all the good work we did in 2020. So everyone listening out there, go get a bumper sticker, That's a homework assignment, okay? Put it and proudly put it on the back windshield of your car. Don't just get it and leave it on your dining room table. You got to act. You know, go to Shiva for President, get that flyer. And then fundamentally, as Jim's going to become a truth for health warrior scholar. It'll really teach you how to think, not what to think, but how to think. And you're getting essentially an MIT education without paying anywhere near that for pennies. All right, Jim, thank you. Be well.